Hello bookish people, and I hope you are well. Join me in this video today in which we talk about all the books that we have read this February. Let's start off with a book I let you guys choose, or that I let my Patreons choose if you're sponsoring me over there. I gave you this pile to pick your favourite from, and you went with this one, 100 Nasty Women of History by Hannah Jewell. And it's been a really good read. A lot of the people in this book I'd literally never heard of before. It goes around the world, throughout history, as the title may imply, looking at women who had an impact and weren't necessarily sanitised and how women should be. I've read a lot of great women of history, of science, of sport recently. This one stood out because it really looked at women behaving the way women aren't supposed to. It looked at women massacring people and women not always being the good guys, but women as people. I do recommend it. It was really interesting, and I now try and pepper all my conversations with friends with weird little facts that I didn't know before about women throughout history, because that's what it's all about. Claiming back people who've been forgotten about because of their gender. If you too want to have some control over what I'm reading, go sponsor me on Patreon. These are going to be the choices for next month if you want to try and pick one. The next book I read was a book for work, and it is called The Map of Salt and Stars by Jennifer Zainab Jukhara. I really hope I'm pronouncing that one right. So I'm not just saying this because I'm working on it. I promise you this is true. This book is absolutely beautiful. I cannot wait for it to get out into the world and for other people to read it and thus be able to talk to me about it. It is a two-stranded tale, the first modern day following a 12-year-old girl with synesthesia, like me, although a different kind of synesthesia. She grew up in America, but when her father dies, her whole family moves back to Syria, where the family is from, and then they get caught up in the conflict in Syria and they have to escape. They go away. They are refugees. The second line of story is heavily rooted in folklore. It focuses on the stories that our main character, Noor, her father, used to tell her. And they follow a young woman who disguises herself as a man so she can follow Al-Idrisi, a famous 12th century map maker, on his journeys as they escape the giant white rook, this huge bird, as they discover the lost city of Petra. They're beautiful, beautiful tales, especially for anyone who loves fairy tales and folklore. I absolutely fell in love with this book. It was really beautifully written, and I loved the way that the author does all the descriptions. Because it's all from the point of view of a girl with synesthesia, she mixes round and puts colour in everything, which I really appreciated. It's also a really necessary book because it looks at the refugee crisis and makes you realise that these people are exactly like you. And how would you fare if your roof suddenly fell in on you and your phone was broken and you didn't have the necessary papers to prove who you were or get to safety? The next book I read is a graphic novel. It is Goliath by Tom Gould. I mentioned Tom in my Best Books of 2017 video. I thought Baking with Kafka was a brilliant, fantastic and funny series of comics. This is a graphic novel, a whole series in one book, and it's a bit less funny and a lot more sad. It reimagines the biblical story of David and Goliath. Only in this, Goliath isn't a monster. He's just a huge guy who wants to get on with the admin work and hopes the war will leave him alone. Unfortunately, reading it, you all kind of know what's coming. It is completely beautifully told, and I'm always astounded by Tom Gould's ability to tell a gentle story with just a panel or two. I then have Beg, Borrow and Steal by Robert Shaw. This looks like a Penguin classic, and it's definitely not a Penguin classic, and you'd figure out pretty quickly why when reading the book. The subtitle is Artists Against Originality, which on the surface might seem like a bit of a misnomer, but it's meant very hard. This is a great book for anyone who likes art theory or does creative things in any way in their life. It looks at what it means to be original, and is anything original? Isn't everything inspired by what came before it? And thus shouldn't we take ownership of that? It questions whether copyright law is just trying to stifle originality for the sake of capitalism, and where is that line between allowing the artist to have a living and allowing new people to create things. And it very much works with new media in mind. When anyone can take a photograph with a handheld device that's always in their pocket, when the internet proliferates images and texts, how can anything be kept as one singular person's creation? And is there a point where we should stop and say, no, here, you've gone too far? I really liked this book because I feel like I'm often coming at this subject matter from the point of view of novels and texts. Is this fan fiction too much? Is this folk retelling too much? Whereas this came at it from the point of view of art and the art world. Is this artist who has photographed a painting 26 times but from different angles really producing something new? It educated me, but it also changed what I thought about writing based on what is happening in the art world at the moment. I then read this super quick little picture book by Chris Riddell called My Little Book of Big Freedoms. In this, Chris Riddell has gone through and illustrated some basic human rights. It is a book to introduce your children to the idea of human rights, but I still enjoyed it as an adult. I love Chris Riddell's illustrations, and I loved that so many of these took the form of hugs of animals, huge giant animals hugging children, because that very much illustrated safety to me. You're being enclosed, encompassed in this great thing. Appreciate it. I finally read The Miseducation of Cameron Post, a book I have been meaning to read for years and years and years. I think I finally got round to it because I really want to go see the film, if the film ever has a UK release date. I'm unsure from my Googling. It was a book I was a bit tenuous to begin. I kind of knew it would be sad, even from the title alone, but also from the little bits I'd heard of it. This is the story of Cameron Post, a young woman growing up in the very early 90s in the middle of America and discovering she's a lesbian and that having a bad reaction. It really harshly and brutally looks at the effects of growing up in a society where you're constantly told that you are wrong. The ways you think and feel are wrong, because there's just no way that that can't impact on you poorly. And it did all of that really complexly. It did look at the different motivations behind people, because no one really believes they're the bad guy, even if they're doing something that eventually has horrific results. So a good one to add to your queer reading shelf, but one that is kind of hard to read in a lot of ways. This month I also reread The Bells by Donielle Clayton because it was published right at the beginning of the month. This was another book I was working on. This book is fantastic. The author Donielle Clayton is fantastic and I had a lot of fun working on it. It debuted on number 7 on the New York Times YA bestseller list, so if you haven't already got a copy you should clearly go out and order one. It is about a world in which you can completely magically change your appearance. You can change your hair, you can change your skin colour, you can lose weight, all by paying a lot of money and going through quite a lot of pain. If you still need more reasons to go pick up this book, it has one of the strongest ensemble of female characters that I have read recently. It has the group of Bells, the sisters, and how they compete with each other but also love one another. It has an amazing villain in the princess of this country, who is never beautiful enough. No matter what she does, she always wants to be the most beautiful, and she will push herself and everyone around her to horrifying limits. It also takes place in an amazingly sumptuous world, with mail delivered by post balloons and teacup animals that ride around on your shoulders as pets. This month I also finally finished A Change Is Gonna Come, short stories by various BAME British writers. I started reading this book a while ago and I read quite a lot of them voraciously and then got distracted by something, and this month basically just finished the last few stories within the collection. I can always tell I really enjoyed a book by if it haunts me afterwards, and some of the stories in this book, they just kept in my mind. There were some I really wanted to read more about. They felt like they could have been the openings of novels, and I wanted the stories to go on and tell me more about this girl who's obsessed with Harry Potter but also has to keep very strict time. Or more about the island where young children are sent reality TV show style when they've committed a crime to go fight each other out and be voted on by the public whether they get to live or die. If you haven't read it already, I really honestly recommend picking it up. There are some brilliant pieces in here. Then we have Skye Song by Abby Elphinstone. This book I decided to read, A, because I'd heard amazing things about it from Twitter basically every day for the last 2 months. B, because I was going to Iceland to try and see the Northern Lights. And this book seemed very appropriate setting-wise. It is set in the land of Erkenwald, a land more north than any other land, where the sky lights up with the Northern Lights as the gods dance, until one day a star falls and the gods stop dancing. And this star becomes the Ice Queen, an evil woman who wants to rule these lands. And to rule them, she has to eat everyone's voices. Our book follows 2 main characters, Flint and Esker, as they try and stop her. It is middle grade fiction, it is beautifully written, it is a kind of quest narrative, and I always love a quest narrative, but set in this icy world with foxes and sleds of dogs that pull your sleigh. Definitely a good one to read for anyone going to Iceland, I say, as someone who went to Iceland. Finally, the last book I read this February is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. I love these books so much. The first book, the 5th season, was one of my top books of last year, just closely beaten by Becky Chambers. This book is just as good as the first book, which is something I never ever say. I normally find the second book of any trilogy such a drag, just there as an excuse to string the first and the last together. This book continues on from exactly where the first book left off, and we continue to follow Eshin and see if she makes a new life amid the destroying new season. We also follow her child, Nassan, and see how she survives with a father who killed her brother and kind of wants to kill her. One of the most amazing things about these books, and there are lots of amazing things, is the way they portray really complex and twisted relationships. That between Nassan and her father is a stunning one. Horrific, but you can completely understand where she is in it. There is still a lot that this book has left me questioning. There feels like a lot of questions the answers have yet to be revealed to. So I really do need to read the 3rd book at some point soon, and hopefully that will reveal all to me. So that's that. They're all the books I read in February. I hope you enjoyed my opinions on them. Let me know if you've read any of them and what you think. Other than that, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys. I've only had a quick flick through since it arrived, but it looks absolutely stunning. I love the fact that it's in full colour, and the press release has touted that it's an international bestseller, that it is.